Welcome to From the Mind of Christine McConnell. In today's episode, we are going to be making some strawberry lemonade bars here in the solarium. So I experimented quite a bit to come up with a recipe that I was really happy with. Now that I've got one, the very first step today is to show you how to make the bars themselves. This recipe begins by putting 1 cup of raw cashews in an open bowl, pouring enough boiling hot water over it to completely cover the nuts, and letting that sit for an hour. Next, I'm going to butter and line a 10-inch round springform pan. The reason I really love this pan is obviously it's going to be so much easier getting my bars out of here with that release function, and in addition to that, I feel like this round shape is going to be really conducive for the cutouts that I'm going to be doing. I'll be making a shortbread cookie crust as the base, and so the way you do this is you scoop 3 leveled off cups of all-purpose flour in a large mixing bowl. Oh, by the way, the mixing bowl set I am using is the gooseberry pattern by Pyrex, and I'm storing my ingredients in canisters made by Tupperware. 1 full cup of confectioners sugar, a dash of salt. Then I'm going to cut up 1 1/4 cup of cold plant-based butter and just break this up into little chunks and drop it in a mixing bowl. I'm now going to beat this for just a few moments in my Silver Chef mixer until the butter gets nice and creamy. And then I'm going to start mixing up my dry ingredients before combining them. I'm going to beat this for just a moment. Then I'm going to be adding 1 full teaspoon of a good quality vanilla. And then after that, 2 full tablespoons of a plant-based milk. Then just mix until it gets nice and crumbly. Oh, by the way, how fun is this set? I think I spent about 2 weeks going to every single thrift shop, antique store in the entire area to find everything that would kind of go together. I even had to build the shelves, paint the carts as well as the appliances just to make sure everything was really cohesive. In case you like anything you see as I use them throughout the episode, I'll do my very best to give you the names. The crust is now ready to bake, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this into 2 parts, set 1/2 of it aside, and I'll be using it for something later, and the remaining half I'm going to crumble over my pan and start pressing down, then to get it nice and smooth, I'm going to put a sheet of parchment paper down and just use a measuring cup to completely smooth it out. I'm going to wrap the remaining half in parchment paper and let it chill in the refrigerator until I'm ready to use it. The crust is now in the oven at 350 degrees for exactly 10 minutes. While that bakes, let's get started on the filling. I want a good amount of lemon zest, but I also don't want to add my flesh to this recipe, which I have very sadly done many times in the past. And so I'm going to be wearing a dishwashing glove while I get all of this zest off. I have a Juice King Deluxe here, and I'll be using that to squeeze out 3/4 cup of fresh lemon juice. also need 3/4 of a cup of raw strawberry pulp. So I'm going to de-stem these and then pop them in my Galaxy blender. And this blender is made by a company called Osterizer. Once I know I have exactly 3/4 of a cup, now I'm going to strain those cashews and get them in the mixer. The recipe calls for 1 full cup of heavy coconut cream. So when you order your coconut cream, it's basically just the solid white part on the top of the can that you'll be using. Blend that until it's nice and pureed, and then you can add your lemon juice and strawberries. I want to punch up the color, so I'm adding a few drops of a white food colorant as well as a deep pink. Oh, let's talk about colorants. If you are someone who doesn't want to use an artificial colorant in your bars and you just bake them off following the recipe, the finished result is pink, but it's a pretty desaturated pink and isn't incredibly appetizing looking, but there is a workaround to this. What you can do is take 3 to 4 cups of strawberries, puree them, get them in a pan and reduce them until you have exactly 3/4 of a cup. Then just substitute that for the fresh berry puree and you will achieve 2 really kind of great things. Doing this is, the one is obviously your bars will be much more pigmented, and then the second is that strawberry flavor should be much more pronounced. In lieu of eggs, I'm going to be using 6 tablespoons of cornstarch to help this gel, 1/4 of a cup of creamed honey, and if by chance you are somebody who doesn't use honey as far as your plant-based restrictions go, then there is an amazing alternative. It is called maple cream by a company called Ackerman Maple Farms. And I buy their syrup and I have it shipped to the house, and it is amazing. So it is a perfect substitute for this, should you not want to use honey. Once that was mixed thoroughly, I added a teaspoon of vanilla as well as 2/3 cups of granulated sugar. Pulse that a few times more, and then you're going to be ready to pour this onto your crust. Once poured, you want to put this into your oven at 350 degrees for exactly 30 minutes. You might even want to check it at the 25-minute mark. For the design I want to create, I actually need 6 separate batches. So what I did was I baked off camera 6 batches of the crust, each in its own pan, and then set that aside. And then one at a time, I followed this entire filling recipe. Each time I was done, I put it in its own individual bowl 6 times. I then tinted them gradually, with the bowl on the far left-hand side being the lightest and the bowl on the far right-hand side being the darkest. Once I was really happy with all of the colors, now it was time to start baking these off. The way I did this was one at a time. So I would pour the filling into one crust, bake that off, wait till it was out of the oven before pouring another filling over the crust, because you really don't want that filling sitting on a crust at room temperature until it's ready to bake. All right, with those done, now we need to move on to the next step, which is making our own cutters for these. I bought a sheet of aluminum from Lowe's, and I'm just going to be cutting this into a strip and bending it into a hexagon shape. The technique I'm going to use is to score any of the lines where I'm going to be bending it, clamp it in between 2 boards, press it down nice and hard to get it as sharp as I possibly can. And then for the rest, I'm just gonna be using a hammer to tap a really clean line into it. I used a non-toxic hot glue stick to fuse these together, but it did end up breaking apart a few times and I had to re-glue it a few times over. So in the future, I would prefer to find an adhesive that really held it better, but also was non-toxic. I also wanted to create a really tiny hexagon shape, so I'm using the aluminum from a can of sparkling water and just following the exact same pattern I did on the previous one on a much smaller scale. The cutters are all done, and obviously you could buy these, you don't have to make them yourself, but it is also nice to know that you can in a pinch. So let's find out if they actually work. Because this is a spring-form pan, all you have to do is trim around the side and then just release the lever, and suddenly you haven't damaged any edges and it comes out nice and easy. This did hurt a little bit, but ultimately I realized if you just place a pot holder directly over and then press down, it's a lot easier on your hand. Our bars are all done and they've been covered and placed in the fridge while we make some decorative cookies. If you don't plan to make the cookies and you just needed the crust on the bottom of your bars, all you have to do is have the recipe that I gave in the beginning of the episode. But if you want to have a little bit extra, then just follow the instructions as I laid them out, and you can roll out these cookies and create them using the second half. You do want to work with this dough when it's pretty cold, because if you start pushing down the little cutout and it's not releasing the center, it means it needs to go back into the chiller so it has some time to firm up a little bit. I tinted another batch of dough with a little bit of pink, and I'm cutting out a large hexagon shape, and this is going to lay under a much bigger cookie that I'm going to be making also in a hexagon shape, but with a whole bunch of little tiny cutouts. This part was really tedious, and I kind of had to map out before I started cutting out everything by lightly pressing my cutter in. But luckily I had a bunch of episodes of My Favorite Murder to listen to, and the time just flew by. I really love how the cookies came out, and now we're going to make some decorations to go on top of them. The first decoration is going to be several citrus blossoms, and the way that I'm going to try to tackle this is I'm rolling up a little tube of parchment paper, melting some plant-based white chocolate on the heater, and then I'm just going to start painting little strips, and then these will be going into the freezer when I'm done. To assemble, I just put a little dab of melting chocolate right in the center, put a little kind of nugget sort of sticking out like a little pollen bit in the middle, and then just started affixing the petals one at a time, and each little blossom has 5 petals. With those done, now I need some modeling chocolate, and I want this modeling chocolate to be about the color of the cookies that I made. So I'm tinting it with a little bit of brown, a little bit of yellow, and then finally with a little bit of red to get just that right shade. Once it was there, I sort of scooped it off to the side of the pan and added some light corn syrup. The ratio here is going to be about 4 to 1, 4 parts chocolate, 1 part corn syrup. I allowed the modeling chocolate to set up in the chiller for about 20 minutes, and from there I was able to roll it out and start cutting out some leaf shapes. Next, I rolled out some very skinny little noodles, laid them down in the center, and I'll be using this as that main vein that runs up the leaf. Next, I added a little bit of a jagged edge around the perimeter of the leaves. When they were ready to be released, I moved them and started laying them around in kind of organic leaf shapes, kind of bending the edges a little bit and manipulating them until I thought they were pretty. I then trimmed away anything that looked too artificial or unusual, and then now I'm going to take some powder pigment with a little bit of vodka and brush this over to get a little bit of a closer match to that cookie. Okay, I am really happy with how this turned out, and now I have just one more idea that will hopefully tie all of this together. Using that same roll of parchment that I used to create the petals, I'm now piping on the back end of what I'm hoping to make look kind of like a strawberry wasp. Now, I did freeze these bits once I had built them up and then smoothed them down a little bit with my fingers and then just started gluing pieces together. I spent a little bit of time fine-tuning them, and then once I was happy, it was time to move on to the legs. I wanted to experiment a little bit with some pre-made aquafaba powder that I was able to just purchase online and have sent to the house. So I want some royal icing, and this is my very first time playing with this stuff, so let's see how it goes. I think I made a little too much liquid, and I just kept having to add powdered sugar until it started taking on the correct consistency, but I did get there. Okay, so I've given this stuff a try, and my honest review is that I think the aquafaba you get from a can of chickpeas has a better flavor. This has just a hint of something I'm not crazy about. I don't want to give up on it. I want to experiment with it a little bit more at a later date to see if there's something I can't do to cancel that out, because obviously this is so much more affordable and easy to work with. I'm tinting this as well to match those cookies, and then once I've done that, I'm going to put it in a piping bag. I've laid my trace that I drew out over a light up board, and I'm just going to start piping this directly onto a layer of parchment paper. I want to make some clear wings for these little guys, and so I found this edible transparent film online, and it absolutely does the trick. It comes in sheets and they're backed by, I would say, like probably some sort of plastic film. And so you just peel it off of that. And I wanted some wings, so I'm just going to start cutting out little wing shapes, taking some of my powder pigments with a little bit of vodka and just tinting them a little bit and making them look as wingish as possible. This was my first time painting wings like this and trying this sort of different technique. And in the future, I think I'd like to spend a little bit more time because I do feel like I could get a whole lot better at this. All right, I go to assemble everything. I have it all ready when I realize it's been too many days and the bars are no longer fresh or ready to be used on camera. And I just felt like crying, but I went back into the kitchen and just had to remake all of them. The lesson I learned here is obviously you want to make your ornamentations first and the bars last. Another thing I will say is try new things and failure go hand in hand. So I'll gladly take falling on my face any day over never experimenting or doing new things. So it's just something important to keep in mind if you do tackle something different. Now I have all of these beautiful bars and I can start assembling everything, and it is so exciting because the way these are all kind of stacking together is really going to be so beautiful. Finding the center was pretty tricky, but this is definitely something you want to be kind of persnickety with. Oh, and I should also mention, it's also something that definitely has a front. So you're never going to get your towers to look absolutely perfect from every angle. So I would say focus on the front where people are going to be looking. Once the bars were stacked, we're getting right down to the end where you just start adding your cookies right on top of that. And then from here, I'll add all of those finishing decorations. I fused the wasps with a little dollop of royal icing, and then from there I could start adding their legs. There is one thing I will tell you about the legs. I wasn't completely crazy about them. I think if I did this again, I'd want to create the legs out of like a pulled sugar, kind of like I did those caramel brown recluse spiders. I think you get something a little bit more creepy and organic if you go that route. Next, I brushed on a little bit of a pattern and then I could affix the wings. And the very final finishing touch is the lightest, most delicate layer of dusting sugar. It is all finished and my gosh, did these come out good? I'll eat a little tiny bit on camera. This isn't my first take. It's so good. This is why I keep taking takes over and over again. The sweetness, the tartness, and the cookie balance each other out so incredibly well. Please make these, you won't be disappointed. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. We're just about to be going into spooky season, and my gosh, do I have some fun plans for this one. So until then, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you again very soon. And of chickpeas is a little bit better. This obviously he doesn't mind it. I'm trying to shoot something here. I know you're a very cute little baby. Okay, are you gonna calm down? Oh my God. What am I supposed to do with you?